Okay, we're back with another Q&A. Remember, we're going to be turning this into a weekly series, so if you want your question answered, then make sure you go ahead and leave a comment. And if you have the time, go back on the old episodes and make sure your question wasn't answered. Obviously, there's going to be quite a few episodes at this point, so I don't expect you to do that, but at least look at the titles and get an idea of what questions were answered. Alright, starting off with Alvin, who asked the question of, which villain would you like to see in Injustice 3? Anti-Monitor, Starro, Darkseid, or Crime Syndicate? If I have to choose from these four, which is a very limited option, I would go with Crime Syndicate. The reason I would go with Crime Syndicate is because, first of all, I think that that's an amazing way to do a Titan story, because you can still use characters like Superman, Batman, the main Justice League members, and you can still use them in marketing material because they're in the game, but as far as the actual story mode of the game is concerned, they don't need to be involved. You can have a young, not necessarily the actual Titans, but a younger Justice League taking on the Crime Syndicate, and all of the Crime Syndicate members, when you go into like single fight or you go into multiverse, they'll just be premier skins for the main roster characters like Batman and Superman. That I think would work very well if you wanted to do a younger Justice League story, but even if you don't want to do that, I do think Crime Syndicate would be pretty good. But if you don't want to tell a younger story, I'd probably go with a character like Darkseid, just because he's an easy, big, recognizable villain, especially because he's about to be included in the DCEU film, so he's going to be immediately recognizable even to the most casual of fan. What do you think about an Hourman premier skin for Bane? That is a fantastic idea. When I was starting to do my prediction list for DLC, I threw Hourman on the end of my prediction list as kind of an honorable mention. He wasn't really an actual prediction, and the reason I included him was because a long time ago, Ed Boon actually teased him around the time people were speculating about what characters would be on the roster, but I never actually thought he would make his way onto the DLC roster, especially after seeing Fighter Pack 2's trailer, and I wasn't sure what even window was open for him to show up in the game, because I definitely don't think he's going to be in Fighter Pack 3. I would be amazed if he was in Fighter Pack 3. Absolutely shocked. But I could see him being a premier skin for a character. Now, I don't specifically know about Bane. It would make the most sense because Hourman's powers work off of kind of like a drug, so I suppose, but it doesn't even really make sense for Bane because the way Bane's trait works in the game is that it like gives him an immediate shock of power. That's not really how Hourman's works. If Hourman took more of his drug, he wouldn't get stronger. At least I don't think so. I think the way his drug works is he like literally just takes it and then becomes a superhero. Do you think Lex Luthor power armor premier skin would work for Cyborg? Maybe, probably not. The way Lex Luthor is set up in the Injustice world is that his power suit is quite big and bulky, and whilst there have been slimmer versions of it that would definitely be more akin to what Cyborg uses in the game right now, it's not exactly the most common thing in the world. Generally, he's portrayed as a big and bulky character. So I certainly wouldn't be expecting it. It's definitely a thing that's possible, but again, I'm not sure too many people want it, and it definitely wouldn't work immediately. Like, you would have to do a lot of work around. Also, he does a lot animation-wise that I couldn't necessarily see Lex Luthor do. Like, Cyborg kind of fights mixed martial arts style, outside of course, his zoning stuff, but his actual fighting style is very somewhere in between mixed martial arts and street fighting, and I don't necessarily see Lex Luthor doing that. If you look at the subtle animations that Lex Luthor has in Injustice 1, he's very, like, hard-hitting, big guy, and I don't think that really just works with Cyborg at all. Should Deadshot get a Deathstroke sword as an epic gear ability, like Staff of Grayson? That is an amazing idea. There's probably a lot of Deathstroke fans who aren't happy when I say that's an amazing idea, because for some reason, I don't know why, I disagree with this, but a lot of people see Deathstroke's character as the sword, I guess, because every single time I talk about the idea of a Deathstroke or Deadshot premier skin for either of the two characters, people seem to always bring up Slade Wilson has a sword. Again, personally to me, Deathstroke is Deathstroke. The sword isn't what makes the character for me, so giving Deadshot a gear ability that gives him kind of like a Staff of Grayson effect, replaces his current trait, and allows him to pull out a sword would be pretty interesting. One of the big problems with that, though, would be his trait is actually his accessory. If you haven't noticed, basically the way Deadshot's trait works, he modifies his wrist cannons, and if you go into his gear system, you'll see that his wrist cannons are his gear system. So if a gear ability had to replace that with a sword, so in the end I think it probably takes a little bit too much work to justify it, but I do think it would be a really good idea. And he's already got a ton of moves that they could just replace animation-wise to use the sword. For example, the cartwheel he does, or the flying knee, or whatever. You can have all of that use the sword instead, and probably deal more damage. You could even have one of them, you know, string into a back three or something like that. I think it's a really good idea. But again, it would probably take way too much time for them to justify putting that amount of time into it. Who do you want to see most as DLC? I've said this a couple different times in my Q&A, but I'll say it one more time. This is the last time I'm answering this type of question. Vibe. Vibe is absolutely my most requested character. I would be so happy to see Vibe because Vibe, man, Vibe's just a cool character, okay? I'm not going to justify it again. Vibe is awesome. I will always love Vibe. Hashtag Vibe for Injustice 3. Or, you know, Fighter Pack 3. That works as well. Do you think what happened to Swamp Thing being the hardest character to win with in Injustice 2 would happen to Beast Boy if he ended up being DLC? I'm not quite sure what you mean by hardest character. Not a lot of people would disagree with me when I say Swamp Thing is probably the worst character in Injustice 2 right now, at least. That might be what you mean by hardest character, but you might also mean that he's just difficult to play, because I would say that both of those two things are true. But either way, I don't think it really necessarily applies to Beast Boy in any way whatsoever. If you are struggling to play a character, learning characters are actually pretty easy in Injustice. They've taken a lot of steps towards making the game a little bit more transitional. Basically, the way that every single character works, at least when you're first learning them, is figuring out how to use the back three, which is backwards and X or backwards and A, depending on, you know, which console you're on. And it is pretty easy if you just sit in training mode for like less than 10 minutes to figure out how you can get each character to do that in the middle of a combo. And Swamp Thing is no exception to that. That being said, Swamp Thing is a character I have the least amount of playtime with. But the point I'm trying to say is that there's no real connection between Beast Boy and Swamp Thing at all. But even if it does turn out that this does happen to Beast Boy and that he's incredibly difficult to play, if you put enough time into a character, you can figure it out. Even if Beast Boy ends up being the most technically difficult character to play, if you're a massive Beast Boy fan, you should still be able to get the gameplay enjoyment that you're looking for. And as far as balance is concerned, there's no way to tell how good Beast Boy would be until, of course, he's in the game. Would you rather play a multiverse event for Wonder Woman DCEU gear or buy a premiere skin with DCEU suit with source crystals? The way I'll answer this question is, if it worked like a premiere skin and I had different voice lines, then I would like to purchase it with source crystals. As far as it just being gear, I mean, I'm happy with unlocking it through a multiverse event, but honestly, I could be convinced either way. I don't really have a dog in this fight. I would really like to see premiere skins be used for the movie characters, but it is really difficult to get those movie actors in to record voice lines, so I'm definitely not expecting that, but maybe for the CW characters, which I will make a new video about the CW characters sometime in the future because I hear a lot of people talking about it in my comment section. Do you think a Raven skin would work for Dr. Fate? Maybe, but again, it's the gender swap thing, but I'm assuming you're asking under the clarification that if we were allowed gender swaps. And I would just say that I think a better character is probably still Starfire, just because of all the animation. I don't really want to see Raven do the whole wrist thing that Dr. Fate does. That really is a Dr. Fate specific thing. I can't see anybody else other than Dr. Fate doing that. Would you like to see King Shark as DLC? Wow, this is a question I actually have never gotten, so I'm proud of this question. Good job. King Shark is a character I actually knew nothing about before the DC TV shows. If you don't know, he shows up in Flash Season 2? Yes, 2. And the character works surprisingly well, despite the fact that he's just kind of a big shark. Somewhat like Killer Croc, but a little bit more intimidating because of his massive size, although in the comic books, Killer Croc is portrayed as just as massive. I suppose that doesn't directly apply. Basically, the way I see it is the only way that we will end up getting King Shark is if Killer Croc is a Fighter Pack 3 character, and then King Shark is a premiere skin for him. I don't think that King Shark is a popular enough character to be able to put in Fighter Pack 3 or any other DLC package over a character like Killer Croc, who obviously has a large fan base in the Batman fans. But as far as would I like to see him, yeah, sure. But there are like 1,000 other characters I would rather see before him, but I definitely wouldn't be disappointed about King Shark. 1,000 was a bit of an over-exaggeration. It's probably like 10. Do you want to see Adam in the game? And this is one of those characters that I would put in front of King Shark. Adam is a character that I love. If you're not familiar with the character, I would definitely urge you to check out some source material because this character is very cool. Then again, I'm a massive geek, so I love all the science characters. Possibly I have a bias, I guess. It's interesting because a lot of people building up to Injustice 2, I brought up Adam a few different times. A lot of people brought up Adam because Adam is a, you know, semi-fan favorite character. A lot of people do like him and he's getting a lot more popular now because he's on the CW shows. Granted, it's a very different version of Adam, but that's where he's getting popular. And a lot of people had some complaints about the idea of Adam being added to the game just because he could theoretically shrink. But there's a lot of different ways that NetherRealm could design around this. For example, maybe he only shrinks during certain strings. Maybe he only shrinks during abilities and he doesn't actually shrink his hitbox. It's just his ability. Maybe all of his shrinking abilities come in through command grabs, so it's mid-animations. The hitbox is untouchable anyway. You could also have him shrink down in his super move. There's a ton of different ways you could do it without actually affecting hitboxes in any way. And I certainly hope they do decide to do this because Ray Palmer is an awesome character. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. My name has been Bilbsy. I've been appreciating your support so much recently, and I know I've been saying that a lot, but it's because it's true. I'm not sure how many subscribers I'm going to have at the time of me uploading this video because I'm recording it on Friday and it should be going up on Sunday or Saturday. And that's because every video I upload on the weekend is pre-recorded because they can't record videos on the weekend just because of my current living situation. But I am getting pretty close to 10,000 subscribers. At the time of me recording this, I've got like 9,600 or something, which is crazy because we started this channel less than 6 months ago, meaning that we're getting more than 1,000 subscribers per month. And we started from scratch. We didn't have like a prior channel. We didn't get like a shout out. Oh, actually, I did get a shout out from Caboose on Twitter, but I only grew like 50 subs or something like that, which I appreciated that, Caboose. Thank you. I don't write that off at all. He was one of the first people in this community to recognize me, and I'll never forget that. But the point I'm trying to say is that it's not like I had any prior impact on this community. I just joined it, started making videos, I started talking about the game I was passionate about, and you guys supported me for it. And I cannot thank you enough for that. I want to start putting a lot more work into my content, and I intend to do that moving forward, and I hope you're here for the ride because it's about to get a lot more interesting. You probably won't see the effects of this extra effort I'm putting in for a little bit, just a tiny little bit. Give me a couple weeks to sort it all out, but I promise it's about to get amazing in here, or at least I hope you guys think it's amazing. Keep being awesome, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.
Holy mackerel.